Hi, good people. Welcome back to A Fork in Time, the alternate history podcast. This is Chris Coppola doing intro duties, and I am joined by, do you think Nemesis co-host? What
Frenemy,
frenemy? I think pod frenemy,
the Moriarty to
frenemy
your
of the
Holmes.
um. Well, you already heard him laugh, but yeah, go and introduce yourself, Dylan.
Hello, everybody.
Um, Today, we were talking, and one of the things we're going to try and do, we've got a couple of different series we're doing, and unlike other podcasts, we actually record like parts of a series as independent recordings. We're not like, I don't spend 4 or 5 hours sitting here looking at Dylan. There are limits to my masochism. So basically, this is just a shorter, kind of a fun episode we're going to drop between a couple of those. And it's about cuisine. We've talked about this before. I think it's kind of funny that the members of the podcast are from barbecue areas, with the exception of Evan and Kai being from California, and we've definitely we've talked about California barbecue as like generic US, as opposed to like, for a while we had Eric Rush was from Missouri, we've had Texans, we've had Memphis, we have myself representing the actual home of real barbecue. So we've talked about cuisine before.
I didn't realize you were from the Caribbean.
And there's that mute button.
Yep. All right, it's been a good episode, everybody.
Later, he's having some technical difficulties. But basically, we love our food. We talk about it. And a lot of times we talk about, or some, we're interested in kind of the history of it. So this is one of those fun episodes that Dylan has been bouncing around with us a little bit before, which is a certain ingredient that is, I think in like Cajun cooking, you have like the Holy Trinity.
Yeah, you have like mirepoix, which is the basically the standard for all beginning of Cajun cooking. It's your vegetable trinity. It's every culture has some stuff like it.
Like you have the mother sauces in French, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's 5, but yeah.
Ooh, this might be, maybe this is.
Full disclosure, I'm a bit of a foodie, so I'm going to throw a bunch of stuff in this episode.
I mean, if we next time we ever do like a video, anything or whatever, Dylan is tiny compared to me. You could look at me and tell I like my food.
Oh, you trust me, I do too.
But I guess this might be the mother sauce of British cuisine. Is it fair to say that?
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to phrase it. I think it is a really good, like fundamental aspect, especially more than we think. And it's even more interesting if you think about how it essentially came about because of an accident.
Okay.
Which is really kind of, I think, where our fork is going to go. So what we're talking about, and it's really not just English cuisine or British cuisine, but it is very fundamental in American cuisine. We are talking, of course, in our.
Oh, no, don't even pretend, of course. This is coming out of left field because let's be perfectly honest. Like, average American hearing British cuisine, what? Like, is it Colgate toothpaste? What is like the.
Well, in the American way of pronouncing it, we are talking about the good old wash your sister sauce. Or
wash your sister sauce?
Chris, you as much as you claim to be from the origins of barbecue, you ain't really all that Southern if you ain't never heard that. Yeah, wash your sister sauce, or more accurately described as Worcestershire sauce, or if you really want to pronounce every letter of every word syllable, it's Worcestershire sauce.
No practitioner of the English language pronounces every single letter.
Well, to be fair, most people don't practice the English language, which explains a lot. So, but we're talking about Worcestershire sauce. And Worcestershire sauce is really not all that unique. In essence, it's just a fish sauce with some extra stuff in it. Fish sauces are widely used all over the world. Obviously, if you've ever cooked Chinese food or Asian food at home, fish sauce, just generically fish sauce, even though there are more formal names for it, it's very common in that. The Romans actually used a fish sauce called garum that was so popular, they put it literally on basically everything that I forget at one point during the Roman Empire.
What is that? So this was kind of like the original Frank's Red Hot. They put that shit on everything.
Pretty much, yeah. And for the Romans in particular, it really was like that because I think in the Roman Empire at one point, and I'm gonna totally get this. I'm just kind of ballparking this, but I think garum was like 10 or 15% of their GDP or the equivalent of their GDP at one point. Like it was what Frank's Red Hot wishes it could be. And Worcestershire sauce is just kind of it's just kind of a modern variant of it. But the story about how it gets started is interesting because it is a purely accidental thing that makes Worcestershire sauce into what we understand it today. So there is actually some time travel involved. That's how you know this is a real fork in time episode. We are going back in time. We're going back to the early 1800s. Lord Marcus Sandys was at one point the governor of Bengal in British held India. I do not recall in 1810 what it would have formerly been called, but he's in India for the British governing.
If he's 1810. He would have been not the British. Oh, I get to. I don't
know. I don't know if this was the EIC or the.
No, it would have been EIC.
It would have been EIC. Okay,
because basically it didn't become British
until like the 1850s, I think,
yes.
Right?
Late 1850s even.
Yeah, it's the 1857 after the Sepoy Rebellion, I think.
Yep.
Clearly, I've been listening to Empire lately. Shameless.
I know.
Shameless.
The first war of Indian independence.
Yeah, we won't go there. Yeah,
that.
But basically, Sandys is in India governing in the early 1800s, and he runs across this fish sauce. So when he ends his tour raking in all the money that he can in India, he goes back home to the British Isles, and he wants to recreate this sauce that he had, this fish sauce. So in 1810, he hires a couple of chemists from a little town called Worcester. If you're in England or Massachusetts,
no. Don't even try. No.
But
Worcester.
Just
Worcester.
Sorry,
Worcester for those from Massachusetts.
Yeah,
I don't have any listeners there.
I'm sure we've got a couple. But so these two chemists that he hires are from Worcester. So these are the guys that he hires to develop this fish sauce, and they've tried recreating the sauce with today's basically modern ingredients, which is vinegar, molasses, anchovies, onions, and garlic. But they just literally put it all into a barrel and mixed it up and tasted it, and it tasted absolutely atrocious. So, like any good,
anchovy, molasses, and vinegar tasted atrocious,
and garlic. Don't forget,
and garlic. Tasted atrocious.
But so they do, as all good chemists do, when they have an experiment that is unsuccessful, they put it in a barrel, stick it in the basement, and promptly forget about it for at least a decade. And then they don't dispose of it,
and then drink it.
Yeah. So this is
all good. That's why you have good chemists and old chemists, and very few good old chemists.
Yeah. So this is what happens. They literally put this stuff in a barrel and just forget about it for over 2 years. And then they're cleaning out at one point, and they're like, "Oh, hey, maybe we got to get rid of this stuff." And one of them, I swear, Chris, literally, basically, he just pops the lid and he's like, "Oh, let me try it," and sticks his pinky in it and tries it.
Like I said, like a good chemist. Yeah, why you don't have good old chemist?
And so that the discovery 2 years later, that is essentially the Worcestershire sauce that we know today. Actually, their company, I believe, is still actually functioning as one of the primary distributors in the Americas of Worcestershire sauce today. Now, the reason why the 2 years was the secret ingredient is because Worcestershire sauce, like many other fish sauces throughout history, is fermented. And the fermentation of all these ingredients, that actually is what made the flavor profile meld and be actually, desirable and acceptable. So, what we're going to explore, mostly because I want to talk about food for as long as Chris is going to let me go on today, is what if those two chemists, John Lee and William Perrins, had not reopened the barrel and tried it and had just tossed it out or disposed of it or whatever, thus leading us to a world where today we would not have Worcestershire sauce. And so I think that leads us into the interesting discussion of sort of what that impacts. And the short answer is basically everything you like to put in your mouth and chew on and or drink. Chris just made a face. I'm just going to stick my foot in my mouth on this episode. It's just going to keep happening. We're going to go with it. On the British side, some of the most iconic British dishes of that you kind of think about when you think of classic British food involves Worcestershire sauce. Shepherd's pie uses Worcestershire sauce. If you put it in the beef mince for our British listeners, basically your ground meat mixture that you put under the potatoes. Welsh rarebit, it's used in the cheese sauce. Full English, which I actually will fully side with the Brits on saying it is the superior form, sort of delivery of breakfast over the kind of classic all-American IHOP special breakfast with pancakes. I'm not saying I don't like pancakes. I just think as a package deal, the Full English is better than a sort of Grand Slam American style breakfast.
Okay. All right. Yes. I will die on the hill of country frying other parts of meat with gravy and eggs.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. Look, I'm from the South. I love some fried meat and potatoes. Don't get me wrong, but just as a whole concept, I think the Full English is the better of the two.
Okay.
And in a Full English, you can use Worcestershire either in the mushrooms as kind of a flavor for like a glaze or a sauce for the mushrooms, or a lot of times people put Worcestershire sauce in the baked beans, which also comes into that other iconic British snack / girl dinner food of beans on toast, which is also can involve Worcestershire sauce. So basically, this shows you that it's in all kinds of things. I think it's in beef Wellington because of the mushrooms. You can use it for, I think it can even be used in like bangers and mash. Or British sausage links, if you want to make a sauce for that. On the other side of the pond, you've got things like that classic all-American amalgamation of things unholy. And no, I'm not talking about bologna. Meatloaf commonly has Worcestershire sauce. It's very commonly used for burgers. As a binder, as kind of a liquid to help keep the burgers moist and together. People use it as marinades on steaks. It is used in Alabama white sauce, which I will probably agree with Chris. We won't have to fight a hill to die on this. It is not actually barbecue. It is just basically seasoned mayo that you put on chicken.
Or also what we described as this is why whenever you hear Dylan and I alone on a episode, it's probably going in the direction of food, so we can take shots at California and or Texas as necessary, because it is an ingredient in what we kind of called California barbecue sauce, which is like the
sort of your sort of craft grocery store style barbecue sauce that you get off the shelf, that generic barbecue sauce flavor. It is also used in a lot of vegetarian savory cooking, like lentils. A lot of times, if you make a stew with lentils, you put Worcestershire sauce in it, which is not vegetarian.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
sorry, I meant vegetable based, not vegetarian.
Okay.
Again, I'm from the South where we eat meat, so it's kind of synonymous in my brain. Even though not in reality.
Your idea of a vegetarian meal is a fish fry.
Yeah, basically. It doesn't walk on land. It's not meat. Mushroom recipes, basically, it's in everything. And that's not even getting into drinking. because Worcestershire sauce has its whole connotation for that, especially, kind of codified by the Bloody Mary, which is this iconic, one, hangover cure, and two, kind of 1920s, roaring 20s drink. Ernest Hemingway loved it. It was really popular in all the bars in New York. May or may not have contributed to the Smirnoff family making their fortune. So it's just one of those things that is everywhere, and we just don't think about it. So, Chris, I'm going to let you expound with any thoughts you have, since I've been talking for like 15 minutes straight now.
Yeah. So the thing I really love about this, and as by the way, as you've been talking, other things have been percolating in my head as to like add to this list of what we consider iconic or emblematic sources of food, or like signifying a certain type of food, and how in this case straight imperialism, but in other cases global interchange always led to these really interesting combinations. So for example, there is an English pub in DC that I used to go do trivia at, and it was English. They very much have all of these other foods. You know what? They also had curry wings. And I was like, you know what?
I'd eat those.
Well, also, but like, hey, how did the English get introduced to curry?
By stealing the world's spices and then promptly using none of them.
There you go. Or we also, another great example is the banh mi of taking like pickled Vietnamese vegetables and throwing them on French bread.
Yeah.
Columbian exchange led to a lot of this. You were talking about what was the fish sauce in ancient Rome?
Garum.
Garum. If you were to think of a modern sauce from the area inhabited by Rome,
it would have no actual Italian ingredients in it other than maybe some basil.
Yeah.
Because the tomato is a pre-Columbian exchange North American and South American fruit.
And
I will say that knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing that a tomato does not belong in a fruit salad.
Huh. Okay. Just as, by the way, I was listening, I forget what it was. I think it was another of our great other podcasts, Behind the Bastards, did one on, okay, you know what? We probably shouldn't call it the potato famine, and there's a lot of other stuff associated with that. But when you hear Ireland, you think potato. Again, not actually native.
Yeah. Or for example, take pasta, which actually, and this is not an American thing, pasta is actually Chinese derivative. It was first brought to Italy in the form of a noodle that came back with Marco Polo after he had been to the court of Kublai Khan.
Okay, I have to say this. A former boss of mine was Chinese, and I literally at one point brought in the Chinese the menu from a local Chinese place, showing her, no, even this restaurant calls it pasta. We have taken this over now. It's ours. By your own admission, it's ours.
But your point is good, because it just goes to show how much of this stuff that we connote with different areas started from a completely different place, or started being used completely differently in a new place, and that's kind of how these things start. And I think that's really interesting for what happens without Worcestershire, because it's so ubiquitous in kind of English American cuisine. Just my guess is, since we're talking about a guy who was a former governor of India, I suspect the Brits probably take an earlier adaptation of at least some Indian cuisine, or the fundamentals of some Indian cuisine, as an alternative, because aside from fish sauce, they're going to be exposed to a lot of other things from India while, the EIC is doing what it does down there. And so that's, at least for England, a very natural vector to bring some of that stuff back. Just as one example.
I think one question I have is, I'm interested in this. Do you think English food adopts the when I say spice, the heat that might be associated with Indian cuisine as opposed to just flavor. And do
th-
you understand the distinction I'm
yeah,
drawing?
yeah. I think so. I think you would probably see the English because while English kind of takeaway curry can be spicy, and even in Ireland, you can
But
find like an
by the way,
Irish spice bag that has heat,
how much of that curry is
but
a
curry.
function of a mass movement of people and an opening of a market in Great
Yes.
Britain for
Yeah. But I think primarily like the flavors that you're more going to see is kind of your sort of more standard curry powder kind of profile, like a lot
okay.
of uh cumin and garam masala and things like that, because the English have traditionally not really been a very chili focused cuisine, and that tends or sort of capsaicin family
Okay.
where the heat actually comes from in spice. So when we say spicy for the Brits, what we're going to be kind of referring to is not so much heat, but more just well spiced,
Okay.
well flavored, well seasoned. So I think that's where you're going to start seeing a lot of that. And you may also start seeing more uh, around this time, the French and the British are kind of having a bit of a rapprochement, especially once you get past the Napoleonic Wars. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
right,
early
right,
1800s, they
yeah,
are not
but
really
cuisine takes a while to develop.
like,
So
because I remember there's like a 3 month, maybe 6 month period in like 1804, 1805 when they are having
not France, yeah,
and yeah, if this thing ferments for 2 years, that's four times.
yeah. So, but maybe the French find a culinary way to get some sort of um, emotional revenge for William of Normandy crossing the Channel hundreds of years ago and taking Normandy with it by exporting. Basically, maybe English food adopts some more elements of like French food, just because they're geographically close. Some of the herbs are going to be kind of similar between them.
The other thing I think is an interesting point is I don't agree with that.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is French food oftentimes is like the rich people food.
True, true.
And
Yeah.
so your actual food of
Yeah, the
anywhere
yeah.
is what is that place's food.
Yeah. I do think you might see more of a kind of akin to, especially in, kind of Wales and Cornwall and, some further places up north. I think you might see more of a tying in with kind of traditional sort of Irish food.
Okay.
Just because of this, like you were talking about the simple production, the commonalities, bread making
Hmm.
is and less puff pastry,
Okay.
more potatoes and stuff, simple hunted game,
Hmm.
which this is a time when beef is produced, but it can be depending on where it's produced and how far away it is from what dinner table it's going on. Beef, which is primarily what you have in the modern day associated with Worcestershire sauce in terms of cooking, that connotation, if there's no Worcestershire sauce, you may not see as much of a drive for beef, and it might stay more sort of pigs
I'm
and hunting fowl and rabbits and things like that.
I'm interested in that because one, as and I could be wrong about this, as I remember, one of the during the period of the potato famine, Ireland was still exporting beef, and beef is still a big part of the British diet. And
Yeah.
what I'm thinking about as interesting is generally, if you see beef associated with any kind of what to an American would be like a weird or a foreign cuisine,
Mhm.
that's a very good sign that it's Americanized.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
yeah, because here we have, the Texas cattle ranges and all of that, where beef is just stratospherically cheaper because we can produce so much more of it.
I'm reminded of a trip I was on to Miami with some friends. One of whom was actually from Massachusetts and would say Worcester properly. Um, and we went to a Cuban restaurant and they got steaks and I got seafood paella. And we're eating and they're like, yours is so much better. Why did you know to? How did you know to get that? And I
And you
looked at
just,
them
yeah, you think logically
and
kind
I
of
said,
about the,
like, and of course it has like up on the walls of the restaurant, it has like paintings or pictures of Cuba. And I said,
Mhm.
look at that. Does that look like Texas? Does that look like the Americas?
Cattle country.
No, no, it's a
It's
fishing
an
village.
island. Yeah.
You think they know something about how to do seafood?
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting one. And I think you might also see, um, on the British side, not just that, but, because this is also the time period when you're starting to get British involvement in Egypt and the Suez and
Mhm.
kind of the sort of Middle East slash far Mediterranean. I wonder if that might open up more of a prevalence towards kind of, Middle Eastern, Turkish, Greek influences just from there. Because I mean, today kebabs are very, very common in British, takeaway spots and
Mhm.
things like that. Not to a, I'm not saying it's going to completely supplant, but the idea of the absence of Worcestershire for some of these more common things, I wonder how much of that sort of stuff kind of at least elements or tones of it come into British
Really,
cuisine to take
interested
its
in that
spot.
linkage we just did about Worcestershire sauce really working with a beef palate.
Yeah. Which
And
and lamb is very common in those so that could be an interesting, and that's kind of what made me think of it, is that could be an interesting, not substitute, but kind of rough equivalency for beef
Mhm.
if people really wanted to get something akin to that kind of red meat profile, because beef and pork are completely different. Even though they're both red meat, they're just completely different flavor
Right,
profiles.
right.
So I think that's interesting. On the American side, obviously I think meatloaf probably has a very different form. I almost think meatloaf would probably be more like uh, more well, I don't think it would be
Would
meatloaf.
it
I think you would see it more like a hamburger steak.
would it be, by the way, primarily beef, or would it be more mixed in with um, you know, today if you go my cheap hot dogs, they're not
Yeah. Well,
they're
like my bologna joke. It's the
yes.
same thing. You don't, it's why it's the old joke from Bismarck that's echoed by Upton Sinclair is, you don't ever want to know how the sausage is made, and you don't ever want to read Upton Sinclair, because you will find out how little of the sausage is actually meat.
But now that I'm thinking about it, beef is such a okay, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I wasn't sure what kind of legs we were going to get with this, but now that we're getting into it, I have a really interesting idea.
Well, I
And,
actually just thought of another interesting one that is,
okay, no, I'll defer.
so I think, and it relates to your kind of Columbian exchange idea, but also if you know, now that we've kind of laid out the basics of Worcestershire as a sauce, there's a very, and speaking of things that are Americanized, there's a very common sauce in America that started out very, very differently and actually much closer to a fish sauce or a Worcestershire. And it comes up in meatloaf and on burgers and
Ketchup.
on a, exactly.
Yeah, I
Ketchup.
remember that scene from The Big Bang Theory too.
So I wonder if ketchup, whether it's the Americanized version or some kind of fish sauce version, I suspect it would be the Americanized version at some point, becomes kind of a, obviously not a one for one replacement because it doesn't
Sure.
taste anything like Worcestershire, but it comes in sort of in some
Or
of the uses.
keeps more of its fish sauce origin, I think is a good way of putting
Yeah, yeah.
it. What I was thinking about is much bigger. Um, I think one of the things about beef, Worcestershire sauce is paired with beef so much. Is there still the market for it for
Mhm.
beef
Yeah.
if you don't have a ready
Accompaniment, sauce.
accompaniment?
Yeah.
And so you mentioned lamb, you or any other like meat protein source. Um, are those more popular? And do you have, for example, Lamboy movies?
Well, I think
um,
in America you're always going to have cowboy movies because I think that market for beef.
somewhat. You're always going to have some of it.
Yeah.
But if the demand isn't there, do you have more of a
Well, I think it's
pastoral?
yeah, I was going to say I think it's that or I suspect the most ready replacement would be pork because it's relatively similar quote unquote production in that it's grazing, it's corn slash grass fed.
It's it's
It's a lot of the same
it's
kinds of land.
not because like for generally, and let me put on my North Carolina hat here. Um, they are factory farmed in like you
Yeah,
do not
now
you do
I'm
not
more
need.
thinking kind of at the time.
Okay, you don't
You
need
know,
a
and
whole lot
pork
of
is
land.
also it's the other readily available big meat that
Uh-huh.
farmers, small rural populations would have had. You know, they
See,
would have
again,
had lambs too, but
I was thinking like, you know, on the Great Plains, lamb may actually be taking that over
yeah,
because they are so easily adapted. And like you were just saying, that might be a more important part of the English diet.
yeah. Or you know, in the Americas, does bison become more influential in terms of a if there's less of a demand for beef, bison one is seen as kind of a more acceptable because you don't have the mass produced beef
Mhm.
machine that's already built up, but also maybe a bit of a recognition of, well, we're killing this thing for the pelt anyway, so we might as well get the meat out of
I
it.
mean, that's what I was just thinking about with the lamb, which is, let's be perfectly honest, as into leather as some Americans are, lamb you can actually use for a lot more.
Hmm. So yeah, I think the lamb idea I think is really interesting, and the lamb is can be a much more kind of similar-ish flavor
Mhm.
profile to beef as opposed to, bison's really gamey, but although it is kind of close because they're genetically similar to cattle. But, lamb is much, much closer as an amalgamation for beef recipes
But
in
it
terms of the
also
flavor profile.
works with those other spices
Yes.
that you were
It's,
talking about, where outside of a Worcestershire sauce,
yeah.
lamb plays with a lot of other stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Not necessarily, how did you say it? Basil?
Let's not make fun of weird words that I learned from my parents from Minnesota on today's podcast. Tilapia shall remain in its dusty word bin. Uh, but yeah, it's that kind of thing, and that's why this idea sounds so weird, but it's
Yeah.
one of those things. Once you start bouncing stuff around, it really does have some interesting ideas to it. And like I said, we haven't even really gotten into cocktails, which is the other thing because you could say that Worcestershire sauce actually helped make the Smirnoff family fortune
Mhm.
in a sense because the Bloody Mary cocktail is probably the cocktail that most famously involves Worcestershire sauce, along with a lot of other ingredients that logically should not go together. Let's not even get started on clamato, which is a whole different thing. Um, but Bloody Marys, have Worcestershire sauce in them, and they were developed in the 1920s. And supposedly, there's a theory that one of the guys that the French bartender who developed Bloody Marys would serve it to at this bar was um, the head. I forget the guy's first name, but Smirnov with a V, the founder and head of the Smirnoff with two F's vodka dynasty. Um, and Bloody Marys famously
Were
use
they white?
vodka for the most part.
Were they White Russians? I'm trying to remember.
I want to say they were
Okay,
because that was the reason why they came to the Americas, I
right.
think.
It, they were supporters of the Czar. We
Yes.
need to say that, not like
Yeah.
Lebowski White Russians.
Although those are good too. And they also use vodka. Um, not Worcestershire sauce. So don't put
No.
Worcestershire sauce in your white Russians. It's not going to go well.
As I always say, like somebody had to think about peanut butter and jelly together at some point. Like,
But yeah, you know,
go back in history, like there's always a market, kind of getting back to the idea of the good chemist. There's always a market for people just throwing foods together and see what works.
yeah, I mean, that's my style in the kitchen. Cooking's like jazz. You don't need instructions and you don't need scales. But, you know, that's an interesting thing to think about because vodka really primarily does not take off as a American and then as a consequence, truly global alcohol. You know, let's put aside, you know, what exactly vodka is and how similar it is to like things like aquavitae, general distilled spirits, you know, all of that. But vodka as a kind of conceptual quote unquote liquor type doesn't really start taking off until really not even the 1920s, but the Bloody Mary kind of helps kick it off. But it doesn't even start until the 30s and the 40s.
Well,
So,
I mean, by the way, the whole cocktail thing, the reason most, if you scratch most cocktails, you'll find the 1920s.
yeah,
Reason
especially with vodka because it's cheap and it doesn't require aging. That's
No.
why so many 1920s cocktails have gin.
All of them, because they were using basically illegal, cheap,
Mhm.
not the best spirits.
Yeah.
So the Worcestershire sauce, the orange juice,
Yeah. They're flavor maskers.
are just to make cheap liquor palatable.
Yeah. Because you don't drink, especially at that time in the 20s, you don't drink vodka straight. You can drink bourbon straight. You can, you can, in the 20s, I mean, just as a general rule. I mean, you know, you can drink Grey Goose today, fine. It's no problem. I wouldn't drink Smirnoff straight today, but you know, you do you. But at the time, because bourbon and all these other things require this aging or they have a flavor profile, you know, the cocktail landscape is different. But without the vodka association with the Bloody Mary, you know, gin, I wonder, which is already an English thing before vodka kind of comes into the picture from the Russians importing it to America. I mean, you know, I wonder if gin kind of supplants that position to some extent that vodka kind of takes in the 30s and 40s.
The reason I say no is this. I can legitimately joke about drinking vodka straight. Nobody can, with a straight face, talk about drinking gin straight.
If you have, you actually can if you have the right gin. I've found one or two gins that had a flavor profile that I could drink straight. I didn't do a lot of it, but I could do, you know, one glass on the rocks. But yeah, it's gin is kind of that same flavor masking kind of concept as vodka. So without something like the Bloody Mary that has Worcestershire sauce in it, I mean, I'm sure you could find other stuff to put in a Bloody Mary. Yeah, I mean, today they put cheeseburgers on top, so who knows? But it's interesting to think about what the cocktail landscape would have been, especially in the 20s and 30s and 40s. I mean, there's a reason why bathtub gin is a phrase. It's the other thing that you can easily make with crappy stuff and still pass off. You know, whiskey, I don't know if you've ever had actual White Lightning. Oh, it is unaged whiskey tastes like absolute trash.
Do I need to put on the North Carolina hat again?
I mean, yeah,
I've had White Lightning.
Yeah.
It's delightful.
It does the job. We'll say that. But it's you know, kind of one of those interesting things. And meatloaf, the reason why this whole detour kind of started on that is because, you know, that's probably like the most iconic, other than the hamburger.
Mhm.
Meatloaf is probably the most iconic 1950s, like you think of a dinner that was going to be on the table in every red-blooded American household. It was meat in a bread pan covered in ketchup. So,
Like, are
without
you even
Worcestershire,
trying? Are you even trying to mask the Midwestern now? Or
what are you talking about? I was just describing what meatloaf physically is. It is meat in a bread pan
the-
covered in ketchup. That's literally what it is. The only other thing that could take the cake is those weird Jello salads, but we're not going to think about those right now. So it's this is one of those things I realize we have completely jumped the shark and we are now just randomly throwing ideas out. But that was kind of what this episode was going to
that's
be.
what this was gonna.
So, it's I will apologize to the listeners if you expected some deep revelations about the nature of cuisine on this, and instead of me and Chris just working ourselves up into an appetite for dinner. But that's sometimes we give you complex economic theory discussions and alternate
Oh no,
timelines.
that's where I was going with the whole like lamb taking precedence over.
Yeah.
Is like that very much changes migratory patterns and
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I didn't even think
yeah,
about that.
right.
And like, does
And economic development is Chicago
yeah, is Chicago, or do the Brits have as much of an interest in Argentina because that's their alternative source of beef is Argentine beef?
yes. So
Is the Falklands War even a thing?
We've gotten back to that. Absolutely, that's a thing. Yeah, yeah. Well, but like economic development of huge swaths of America, like
Yeah,
Kansas
I didn't
City,
even think about that. Yeah, I
St.
didn't put
Louis.
that together. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. The especially the kind of Oregon Trail parts of America, St. Louis, Kansas City, Chicago, Bozeman, even, some places up there, they would probably not even be on. Some of those states might not even be states as early as they were in our timeline,
or
because,
or they may be, we may have Dakota finally.
yeah, the unified Dakota of Harry Turtledove's dreams.
Well, so also like if you remember Turtle, so much of Great Britain's like economic lifeline is from Argentina in this.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Also,
so
I don't believe that you need that lamb necessarily lends itself to low and slow cooking.
oh, true. No, it generally does not. There's also really not a need for it because
Right.
I've never butchered a lamb, but I know enough about parts of pigs and cattle that lamb doesn't generally have cuts that are that tough that it necessitates it.
And so now we have literally thought out of existence one of the major, I guess,
You're not going to outthink
branches.
barbecue out of existence.
Huh?
You're not going to outthink barbecue out of existence. It
Oh, no,
already
not
existed.
barbecue, but one of the major branches of that family.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, there go all our Texas listeners to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. If they don't hate me yet, I don't know what will make.
Well, that brings another thing that I've been trying to think of is what that does to like Mexican cuisine, because that's the other North American cuisine that does a lot of beef.
Here's the thing.
Is Tex-Mex
the real interesting thing? Al pastor.
Oh yeah.
Al pastor tacos or cooking style. You'll see that a lot. Literally means in the style of the pasture.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that food or that style developed in Mexico from immigrants from the Middle East. A lot of Armenians and other
yeah. Normally lamb eating typically cultures.
Northern Mexico after the ravages of the revolution and the series of wars there.
Yeah.
So that's a historical like development of that. So maybe al pastor becomes almost what Tex-Mex is versus a very interesting and a good hard trunk of that tree, it becomes that tree.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't, that I hadn't thought about that. And the long pointless dovetail of that is Taco Bell
Well, no, no, no,
is going
no,
to have
no.
to find something
Wait.
other than dog food to call steak so that they can sell it.
Okay.
Because they can't use the ground beef that they have because there's not going to be a demand for like one Mexican quote unquote Mexican food is going to completely change
Okay.
in terms of the American perception.
For let me throw a bone out to some of our Texas listeners. There is literally a place in Texas called Taco Bueno. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all.
I've never had the chance to go there, but yeah, I've
Um, Taco
Although actually,
Bueno.
without beef, fast food, that's another thing.
No, I don't think so. And I'll come back
Okay,
to that in a
I mean
second.
not
I
like
think,
complete absence, but the dynamics of it
well,
change.
the dynamics change. By the way, I was just going to say Taco Bueno is a cross between Taco Bell and Mexican food. That's the best way to
Yes,
describe
yeah,
it. Um,
it's one degree closer to Mexican
but
food.
let's be perfectly honest. Thinking about like fast food, um, I mean, it takes a different form, but it's the leg of lamb on the rotisserie in the back lends it really does lend itself
Yeah, or
to like a fast food style. Just
yeah,
shave
yeah,
off a bit,
shave it
drop
off.
it
Yeah,
there.
so I think maybe fast food you would see more.
Because again, that's a
You,
lamb based
yeah,
lending of itself to that.
yeah, and I don't think you would see it, at least in America, necessarily in kind of the wraps and the pitas and things like that. Because America is so grain based, you would still see it on a bun.
Yeah,
But also,
I mean, there's no reason.
talk to people in Britain. A lot of times, they refer to what we would call a chicken sandwich.
Mhm.
They would just call it a chicken burger. So I think we might see some of that.
I mean, what you'll have is, I mentioned carving it off a leg of lamb.
Yeah.
Not to get too Upton Sinclairy. There are parts of a lamb other than the leg.
Yes.
And those parts will be ground up and could easily take the place of some of the ground beef in what we see.
Well, you're already like today, you're seeing like I've seen like 4 of these recipes over the last couple of days that I want to try is this concept of kind of making a knockoff, kebab rotisserie shaved meat by, grinding up lamb, this other stuff, seasoning it between baking, you know, parchment paper sheets,
Mhm.
pressing it out and baking it in the oven. That is a very easy conversion that could lend itself to a less beef oriented fast food because it's mass preparable. It's very easy to do in and out.
And what I find really, I do kind of want to get back to like this idea of if we don't have cows, we don't have cowboys. And if you want to talk about like, hey, when they have TV dinners, when they come out with meatloaf TV dinners and they sit down in front of the TV, what are they watching?
Well, I don't think that we wouldn't have cowboy movies per se, because a lot of that cattle development, especially in kind of the far west and sort of northern Mexico, a lot of that was there, even before America was a country, because a lot of that is derivative of Spanish colonial stuff. I do think it wouldn't be as iconic.
I think what you might see more of is, when you look at American, I'm thinking about, I want to say the Johnson County War. I might be wrong about that, but a lot of the like Billy the Kid stuff
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mexico is
yeah.
fighting between farmers
Hmm.
who are settled locals,
Yeah.
cowboys that are passing through. Just production wise, I don't think you have that anymore
No,
because
but
you're
oh yeah, yeah, I agree because the range war type stuff. But one of the things that you see kind of in some I mean, it's still a cowboy that you see it in, but in like there are some Clint Eastwood westerns
Hmm.
that you see from the late 60s and early 70s where it's not so much a cattle issue, it's a mining issue.
Hmm.
And that's the thing that still is very much, I mean, look at Tombstone and the OK Corral. The gunfight was at the OK Corral, but the only reason Tombstone existed was because of the silver mines in the area. And that's why I think you would still see kind of cowboy movies
Okay.
to some extent
See, I just
because
think,
that the drifter kind of archetype may not be as much of a cowboy
yeah,
kind of thing, but those kinds of westerns, I guess, more
Westerns,
generally.
because I also was thinking about maybe it's, you and I are both there's a gap, I think, in Americans' understanding of like some people like participated in the Oregon Trail and then cowboys became the thing, but our generation lived that Oregon Trail on that game.
Yes.
And I think the storytelling of migration
Yes.
lends itself to
Yeah, the
so
pioneer.
they're moving across the West, but they're not doing it because of the cows. They're
Yeah,
just
they're doing it, yeah, for what yeah, the mining, they're doing it
right.
for whatever other reason. I do
Or
also
the
wonder if,
pastures.
yeah, or the pastures, or, I also wonder if with at least fewer and kind of different cowboy movies, I wonder if that gives your kind of hard-boiled detective noir films a little bit more legs. I
Hmm.
wonder if that does something to make early science fiction slightly more broad-based. It's a little too
Okay.
weird to really grab a ton of, but like your kind of Buck Rogers type, almost like Westerns in space kind of deal. I
Mhm.
wonder if that has a little more palatability because this is also the space race. You can still use the
So
same.
something else is really interesting to me now that we're talking about this. American anti-heroes,
Yeah,
like the Clint Eastwoods, the high
the Charles
profile,
Bronsons.
the people that are like social outcasts being the heroes.
Yeah.
Is that a thing? Is there another like vehicle for that?
I think that could become an because it's kind of an element in some of the characterizations of some like noir movies, like
Because
the
I'm
alco
thinking
the
about,
downtrodden detective kind of
or
shtick.
I'm thinking about like the speaking of cultural gaps, there's like in the 30s, there are still kind of gangster movies.
Hmm.
Or even better, we did that episode on kind of monster movies. I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Frankenstein is a really good out, but and fast forward, you don't get anything in that entire genre right up until like 1969, Bonnie and Clyde,
Yeah,
70s,
yeah, yeah,
Godfather stuff
yeah,
starts happening.
yeah.
Like do we see more of those genres because we don't have
The cowboys
not
drowning everything out.
to pull everything too back together, but to quote this Tony Soprano and talk about Gary Cooper, whatever happened to Gary Cooper. But I hope I know we have foreign listeners, but like, yeah, we're dropping a lot of American pop culture on you right now, and I know that.
Well, or I was thinking like would war movies have a little bit more prevalence, especially stuff that is a little more exotic, like French Foreign Legion type
Okay.
stuff,
Hmm.
North Africa, because people might want to, especially if they're eating more lamb, they may be not necessarily more exposed, but they may be more primed for some of the more exotic kind of cultural references, especially for, GIs in the 50s and 60s who had been to, Sicily or had been to North Africa or things like
I
that.
think at that point you're very much like telling if you're dealing with those people, you're telling them their stories back to them.
Yeah, I can see that. Maybe something in like South
But like
America or
the 1930,
like
I
when you
felt
said the 1930s, I immediately thought of I forget what there's a really famous like the African Queen
yes.
about the steamboat in the Amazon. Those kind of adventure movies instead of some of the cowboys type stuff. because that gives you that sort of sense of adventure. It gives you the characterization of kind of the drifter, the American coming in from out of town.
Mhm.
There's all kinds of things you can play with.
Yes. Um, I'm looking for one movie. Well,
We did not expect to turn this into a movie episode when we started talking about food.
ah, this was shocking to me. Shocking to me. A couple of last month, I was home and my father like has old, the like you can watch them for free through a streaming service.
Yeah.
And he was watching one called The Real Glory, which was about Americans in the Philippines during the Moro Rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw this and I was like, oh, okay, I know about the Philippine insurrection. I was shocked that like this was something they're actually like showing in an American movie because
Mm-hmm.
like Americans don't know about that.
Yeah.
Don't talk about that. So maybe that becomes, maybe, I mean, let's be real honest. What movie features the Battle of San Juan Hill?
I couldn't tell you.
So maybe that.
But do you even have the Battle of San Juan Hill with this kind of mythologizing? The connotations that we think of when we say the Battle of San Juan Hill with the Rough Riders and all of that, because the Rough Riders won't be quite as an Americana of a thing if we've been talking about all this stuff without cowboys. I mean,
the one thing I do want to very much say, they were Harvard kids. A lot of them were Harvard kids.
And that one Confederate general who didn't remember what side he was fighting for.
That were playing dress up as cowboys.
Oh, yeah, no, 100%.
So you know what? They dress up as something else.
Yeah.
I think some of the like trappings of that might be.
Yeah. And that's more kind of what I was meaning. It doesn't have the same mental image that we associate with it. But that Spanish American word, that is a good adventure kind of idea.
Hollywood, talk to me. We can do a treatment. It'll be great.
Well, the other thing that you start thinking of is, what does that do to guys like John Wayne, who was Ronald Reagan, because these guys were some of the actors that were around when the last of the cowboys were still, around and could teach stuff like John Wayne. I think even back before he was John Wayne, when he was Marion Morrison, like picked up cattle roping tips. I want to say from like Wyatt Earp.
Have you? No. Have you? Okay.
But like there was an actual cowboy on the set of a bunch of John Wayne's movies that actually taught him cowboy stuff.
Please keep listening to our podcast. But Behind the Bastard does an episode on John Wayne, and they talk about the actual cowboy that like taught him a lot of the stuff. Not Wyatt Earp. It's somebody else.
No, but it's somebody who was fairly famous
and was a real cowboy.
Yes, and was one of these guys from the 1880s and 90s.
And they talk about how like you can look at John Wayne, he doesn't know how to lasso.
No, yeah. He also doesn't know how to play Genghis Khan, but we won't go there.
Oh, they talk about that too.
So it's like I said, kind of in the middle of the podcast, this is, since we're coming on an hour, we probably should kind of try and put as much of this with a bow as we can.
No idea we were going to do.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Like you take such a small little accident that does so much to one thing, cuisine. If they don't discover Worcestershire sauce, and then you start thinking about all these different effects. Like I never would have thought about the impact that may have on beef production, and then the subsequent. It's not a Fork in Time episode if Chris Coppola doesn't throw economic theory in there, and we got it with beef production.
Literally what I was doing, and development of like Kansas City isn't a thing.
Yeah. So it just absolutely, and that gets into the development of the Transcontinental Railroad and the railroad system and all that. So it's just fascinating. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You have the great man theory of history, you have the forces and trends theory of history, but one of my personal favorites is the kind of butterfly effect theory of history, where something completely random did or did not happen, and that can change the entire scope of, any number of things that develop into what we commonly think of as sort of like, oh yeah, of course it was going to happen this way. So, Chris, do you have any final thoughts now that I'm done rambling?
I do kind of want to address the opening of this. So we always are throwing ideas back and forth about changing stuff. I think previously, yeah, you guys have already heard the Tudor episode. I think that's come out. So we're thinking about, for example, we have the idea to do if like the topic lends itself to do funny like commercials in the world we create, or changing up the like intro music and playing other music, things like that. We like it. We think it's fun. I want to plug like the Discord, and we want to know what you think. Like, does it work? Does it distract? Were you really weirded out the first time we dropped the fake commercial on you and you had no idea what was coming? I worried about that. But we have those communities. We want to hear what you think. Like, does it work? Does it not work? We're open, and we want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I think a good plug as any for all of our stuff. So if you've enjoyed this episode, or if you want to correct us on any nature of any finer point of British cuisine, or any recipe that you know of that uses Worcestershire sauce that we forgot about, feel free to throw it in the Discord. I'm always down to get more cooking recipes so I can experiment on my poor wife. Let us know what you think of the episode. If you have other episode suggestions, we do try. We may not be very fast in acting on it, but we do try to eventually get some listener feedback episodes, some listener ideas. That's how I started on the podcast, after all, was a suggestion. And Chris, actually, that's how most of us over the years have kind of joined this podcast.
All of us at this point.
So if you have an interesting idea, maybe we'll ask you to come guest on it, and maybe you can come join us and hang out and talk about food and movies for an hour and call it an episode like we just did. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoy another rambly kind of literal and metaphorical palate cleanser of an episode this time, as we, sometimes like to try and get away from the grand themes and historical developments and just talk about food for an hour and see what comes up. So thanks for listening, everybody. Stay tuned for another episode next week. And until next time, Chris, we have a saying: if you come across a fork in time, what should you do?
Take it.
I was going to say stick it in the barrel of fish sauce from 2 years ago and see how it tastes.
I am nowhere near clever enough.
Well, you heard it, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a fork in time, take it.
Thanks for listening to A Fork in Time, the alternate history podcast. Learn more and provide feedback by visiting our website at www.aforkintimepodcast.com. Connect to us on Facebook at facebook.com/aforkintime, or follow us on Twitter at AFIT Podcast. If you want to support the show financially, visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/aforkintime. We hope you will join us next time.